So by the time this talent search came along, because it was Jim looking for talent, I had some Marvel samples I'd kind of put together. I scrapped that and in like a week's time produced sample pages for Wildcats, like, because that was his characters. Very quickly, he offered, he said, hey, would you be interested in relocating to San Diego and being an intern?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Perfect. Now you'll have to excuse the bathrobe. I got in from my vacation 10 minutes ago, ran upstairs, had a shower, and then came back down, you know. So I do feel a bit sleazy. This feels a little bit sleazy.
It's Mark Millar after hours, right?
This is when we start talking contracts now. You know, so.
Yes, that's right. Oh no, is this your casting couch? Is this what's happening?
So you know what? It's funny actually. Like I got in, like I say, 10 minutes ago. We're in the middle of doing this campaign, my second ever Kickstarter, and I've been away the entire month. You know, like normally the first one I did like 20 interviews or something, and I've done 2 interviews. We've been away, and I forgot we had a family vacation in the middle of it. So you ever been to Tenerife in the Canadian?
No, I can't say I have. What's it like?
Really nice, but I'll tell you something weird, right? Like last year we really lucked out. We went away in the school holidays this time last year, and we got this amazing upgrade to this Brad and Angelina kind of hotel through a mistake. They double booked our room, and they put us in this Brad and Angelina kind of building, you know. But we had our own private, you know, kitchens, Olympic swimming pool, all this stuff, right? We weren't paid for it. We actually just got it just by chance because they double booked us. This time the hotel made a mistake again, right? And they put us in the exact same problem. And they put us in this suite above a sort of penthouse type thing above the building, which I didn't know existed. And it's reserved for 6 weeks of the year for the Spanish royal family, right?
Oh my God, you've got amazing luck.
No, we didn't. We just paid a normal room, right? We just paid for a normal room. So my kids are starting to think this is like normal, and I'm like,
I think you're a high roller.
You're never doing this again, right? It's like this is twice. This has happened by accident.
Well, that's funny. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, when I can't say when I've been double booked, I've had quite the same good fortune, but that sounds amazing.
But it's great. So what it did do was it meant I said to everyone, I'm not leaving this room. You know, like this is too nice. Wherever we go from here is going to be less nice than this room. So I just stayed in all the time.
Well done. No, sounds amazing. I'll have to look at it. What was the location called again?
It's Tenerife. It's I always thought of it as a kind of slightly scuzzy place, not fantastic, you know, but there's really nice parts of it. It's like, you know, when you see English hot hooligans, like people smashing up bars and all that. It's like one of those kind of places, but it's actually really nice little parts, you know. So what about you?
That sounds great.
Have you managed to get away at all this year yourself? Are you kind of?
We actually went to I don't know if you've been. There's the what do they call it? Lake Como Art. I think they call it Art Festival, but it's kind of like an art show, Comic-Con kind of thing. Yeah. My wife and I had been generously offered to go there for like the last several years, but we finally took them up on it this year. So that was amazing. And then we spent an extra 2 weeks in Italy. Nice. And that was quite delightful. So that was a nice trip that we had a little bit earlier in the year. And we've been trying to get to Japan. That's our next, like on our list of things, but that hasn't quite come together yet. So that might be the next one on our list. But and then we had my daughters and my wife and I had a nice road trip up the coast of California this summer, which is nice. Oh, nice. My daughters are both in college now, so it's becoming more and more difficult to get them both on the same schedule to be able to do anything. So I was able to corner them and say, okay, guys, we have this like long weekend here. Let's try to make this happen where we can we can't really fly anywhere, but let's do this fun coastal trip. And that worked out really nice. So.
The lights went out, the power went down, and then they made their move. A hole in space as big as the world opened up, and nobody could save us from what came through.
Hey folks, Mark Millar here to talk to you about Conquered, our brand new series on Kickstarter. It's the basic idea, Independence Day meets Game of Thrones. The idea of a portal opening up in the middle of New York City and dragons, barbarians, all these hordes coming in like from a fantasy novel and wiping out America, just taking the country down, and they've got their eyes on the rest of the world. I'd say it's probably the best drawn book I've ever been involved with.
Hi, I'm Valerio Giangiordano and I want to tell you about the biggest project of my career. I've previously worked with Mark Millar on Nemesis Rogues Gallery and with Todd McFarlane on Spawn series, but this is my first huge creator-owned title, and I've been secretly working on this since the beginning of the year. Conquered is an enormous challenge as an artist. The entire world at war with a fantasy world. It's very difficult because I'm creating everything from the ground up. But it's so much fun to draw, and we have got the biggest visual here like you've never seen in a comic book before.
A really weird thing about Concord is it's actually the very first proposal I ever sent into a comic book company. The artwork is a little bit better than my originals, Lee felt pens. When I was 13 years old, I sent it to Julie Swartz at DC Comics in New York. I got a nice letter back, a rejection letter, but here we are, 40 years later, and it's finally happening.
Concord is an insane project and I can't wait to have it on my shelves. We are doing this over 4 volumes and the first is available now on Kickstarter.
If that was a movie, it'd be Adam Sandler and Selena Gomez. Adam Sandler is you know, just getting one last holiday where the kid that you want to spend time with you. You know?
Yeah. That's. I'm finding I'm in that phase of life now where that's now becoming a thing you can't take for granted. You know, your kids start to get busy, and then you're like, oh boy, like they've actually got busy lives now. I've got to actually try to book them, which is pretty wild. But
just have more kids. Just keep having kids.
that was the Jim Lee philosophy. I was like, I don't know how he has so many kids. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't think so. Two wore me out as it is. Like I've already made my hair gray, so I don't know if I could handle anymore. But you never know.
In Japan, are you going to do a comic thing, or are you making it purely a romantic trip? What's your plan?
You know, it's funny. Originally it was going to be a Comic-Con thing, but as I've found out, for whatever reason, it's actually you can get invited to shows in Japan. It seems to be challenging to get anybody to pay for it. So I'm like, well, if I have to pay for it myself, I might as well just make it a vacation and not really make it. Just get the Comic-Con part out of it and just go whenever I want to. So it kind of looks like it'll be that way. Although it would be nice. I've actually never been to meet like any of my fan base there. So yeah. I think that would be a fun experience because people say that there's a decent amount of collectors of my work there. So I think I would miss out on that aspect. But yeah, if it's not an all expenses paid trip, I probably would just make it a vacation and just go, well, Comic-Cons can wait, I guess.
Well, it's funny. I'm exactly the same. We're going to Japan at the end of March. And my wife wants to be there for the cherry blossom season.
Yeah, it's a very popular time.
And I was like, I'd rather be there for the convention season, so someone else is paying for this. I want to see the cherry blossom, so I'm unfortunately having to pay for it myself. You know,
very true. Plus, anytime, I mean, having lived in the States here, I grew up and lived in Colorado, and a lot of people like going there to catch the leaves changing.
Yeah.
And but that's not always the easiest bullseye to hit because like they could change really within a month's time period. So you know you never. I don't know if the cherry blossoms are like that, but it's like how do you know for sure you're going to hit that bullseye like to really catch it? I don't know. I'm sure there must be a system. But
you don't think this is end stage Western civilization? You know, like, can you imagine what our grandparents would think of this? That we're going to Japan because we want to see the flowers change, you know.
Oh, I know. Oh my gosh. No kidding. Or even too, like, I mean, it wasn't even that long ago in human history that like, you know, to go to Japan was like multi-months like boat trip and people died on the trip. I mean, it's like we just take it for granted. Like, yeah, I'm just gonna go over there for like, you know, I'll be there in a day. And like, it's kind of remarkable how much we take for granted our modern conveniences. It's really wild.
Even in our lifetime. You know how crazy it is. Like, I remember going to America and thinking it was the most amazing thing that had ever happened. That was only 30 years ago, you know. But now you go for a meeting and you come back home that night, you know.
It's crazy. Or you even see like these cities in like China now and stuff that look like Blade Runner, and you're going like, wow, I guess Blade Runner's here now. like drones are flying around and like AI, and you're just going like, God, that snuck up on us, but we're actually in the future right now. We just kind of didn't realize it. It crept up on us,
Well, do you know, 10 or 15 years ago, I didn't feel we were there. You know, I remember saying to friends, like, I was expecting the flying cars and robo-taxis and all that, you know. And then I was having a beer in the garden, and we've got like a robot lawnmower, you know, cutting the grass. And I was asking Alexa to play a song. I was watching my robot in the garden, and I thought, we are actually here now, aren't we?
I think we set the bar at the flying cars, right? And that's why if we don't see the flying cars, we're not there yet. But everything else is here. It's like I mean, I was driving down the street here in Southern California, and there's like these little robots that deliver food now, like these little like they look like coolers that just like it's like a mix of a cooler and like Wall-E from like Pixar. They're just delivering food down the streets, and you're just going like, what the hell? Like, how did this happen?
You know, it's interesting. They tried that in the UK about a year and a half ago, and this is where like, people in Britain are really they're really violent, right? For no reason. Like the Brits, they get drunk and they get violent for no good reason.
Oh, I see where this might be.
Trial around Manchester, I think it was.
Yeah,
with those things, and it got kicked to death. Like kicked to death and smashed up. Did this ever happen in the States? Because Americans always seem nicer people, I think. You know?
You know what? That does seem, it might be a bit of a uniquely like hooligan kind of thing. I'm sure it must happen here. I mean, it is LA after all. But I mean, I would think, you know, maybe if it goes into the homeless village or homeless town, you know, it might not come out, you know, that kind of thing. But I don't know. I mean, my neighborhood seems to be pretty mellow and quiet, and the downtown area is like a mild downtown. So I don't think that's happened so much yet, but give it time. I mean, all these things can happen. You know, it's like, I'm sure that's the other thing too. They're trying out now too, is those auto driving cars now too, which is just trippy to see when you see these cars going and nobody's driving it. And they say that they're supposedly safer than like regular cars, but I'm a little less inclined to believe it. But I have been in some, I don't know if they've got those in the UK, but like here, of course, Uber culture is big, and Lyft. And, you know, I have been in a few Lyfts where I'm going like, this guy's a really dangerous driver. I'm not sure why I just got in this guy's car so willingly. So maybe I should give the robot ones a try, because sometimes I'm like, I remember Jerry Seinfeld had a joke once when he was being in the back of a cab in New York, and you start to just zone out like you're watching a movie, and like you go like, oh, that looked really dangerous. But you're like in the car. You kind of like go like, wait, I should be a little more concerned about this, you know. But I always thought that was funny.
So I don't have a cell phone, so Uber, I've never had a cell phone, so Uber for me is just sci-fi, you know, like.
Oh yeah, I admire that. I being in a household again with two daughters and a wife who can't seem to put it down. Like I'm very. You miss the days where people just were not constantly glued to those screens all the time. I've actually heard people too, like they'll start to get like their neck will get like really kind of soft and doughy because they're always like this.
Wow.
Like, yeah. So people are losing definition in their, isn't that wild that they're actually living?
I've got that without.
Maybe you do have a secret cell phone. Yeah.
That's incredible. So, you know, and people are getting sore thumbs and all these things that I don't have as well, you know. But I'll be at a train station and I look down and it freaks me out. I feel like Donald Sutherland in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, you know.
Yeah.
I look down the train station and everyone is looking at their phone.
I'm
the last guy holding a little paperback book or a newspaper or something, like a time traveler, you know.
Yeah. Well, especially for us creative types, right? Because there's this argument to be made that we don't know how to be bored anymore. We don't, and you know, that seemed like such a sin back in the day. Like, oh my gosh, I'm bored.
Yeah.
But as creative people, that's when our minds started wandering and coming up with cool ideas. And you know, I find I still like come up with most of my ideas like if I'm in the shower, because I'm not going to have a cell phone in the shower. So I'm going to wander and start thinking about things. And it's like, we're just too tempted to go, oh, I'm bored for a second. Let me pull out the phone and see what's going on Instagram or something like that. And I'm as guilty of it as anybody. I'm trying to be more self-aware of it these days, because now we have 10 years of study to show like what the fallout's becoming of all of this stuff, like our attention spans. I mean, that's the other thing too, as a creative person and somebody who obviously in your case, who's had a lot of your stuff adapted. You know, they're saying like now that like, you know, Netflix and these places are saying like you have to dumb down your content, or you have to have your characters like say what they're doing all the time, because people are looking at their phones and have to digest. They call it double screen syndrome or something like that, where people will watch a show, but not really. They'll kind of be on their phone and they need to kind of like, they'll miss stuff all the time. Like I see that with, not to pick on my wife, but I see that all the time with her. She goes, wait, what happened? I'm like, well, they just said it or they just showed it, but she was on her phone for that moment. So she lost the plot. And yeah, it's tough because we love to create, right? We love to create entertainment, and it's sad to think you have to dumb it down now, or that anybody would tell you that because society can't digest information, or it's too slow for them or something like that. You know, it needs to be 30 seconds long or something like that.
At the same time, though, it's funny you say that, because at the same time, I feel in a weird way maybe people are getting smarter because they can process information so quickly, you know. So
there's that too.
You know, so like Joe Rogan, for example, as well, he's the greatest argument against people wanting little 5-minute news bites. You know, at the BBC, we're like, oh, we can't have a 25-minute news program anymore. We need to cut it down to 30 seconds.
Oh, interesting.
All this, you know. And it's, but in reality, people love long form. You know, they'll sit and listen to Joe Rogan for 3 hours, do deep with people and everything.
There is that too. There's that
Gen
too.
Z, you know, like young people kind of are reacting against that MTV thing that we grew up with, where everything is super fast, you know. So that gives me hope. That gives me a little bit of hope, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it was actually Bill Maher had a funny joke, I think, on his monologue one time. He said, like, people either want their stuff in 30-second sound bites or 3-hour podcasts, but nothing in between. I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah, but no, that is true.
But you're so right about the people not being bored thing. Like, I'm fascinated with this because part of my job has been a producer and an exec in a studio, you know.
Yeah.
I'm amazed how many middle-aged people are working in all media, you know. So it used to be back in the day, middle-aged people were sort of phased out, really, for the most part. You know, look at comics.
That's true.
Comics was all done by teenagers and 20-somethings, really, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And film's the same, you know. Like Steven Spielberg was your typical young director, 26 years old, making a big movie. Now all these guys are 40, 50, 60s, you know, and even George Miller, Ridley Scott in their 70s and 80s, you know. But there was a thing, did you ever see Bret Easton Ellis, who wrote American Psycho? He did a really fascinating book called White, and he was talking about how millennials were the first generation to not have a chance to get bored from. They were really young, even before screens. Mums and dads were like, oh, you have your Japanese drumming class on a Sunday, you know. The kids were never left.
Have to pack the schedule. Yeah, that's right. That's
and then the phones took over from that, you know. So even when they're walking down the street, they've got earpods in and everything, you know. Like, they don't have a chance to be in their own head. Do you think that's important as a creator, that time in your head?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I mean, again, like anything, there's good and bad, right? It's like there's on some levels, like we have access to so much information now, good and bad. But like, you know, like the idea that like any topic is at your fingertips now, like you know, the internet's at our disposal. Every question has an answer. Every topic has a deep dive. That's pretty fascinating just because we just have so much, anything we want to learn, it's easier than ever to learn anything you want now. I mean, again, when I was younger and in the 80s, obviously it's like, you know, if I want to learn, like learning to draw or learning to like about comic books, you had to like hunt for scraps. Like it was like just little, like you'd go to a comic shop and maybe there'd be a random magazine or comic shop news or some sort of like I forget which one was Comic Interview. I forget what it was called, but like you'd like, and you'd get an interview and maybe there'd be a little nugget in there of something, you know, kind of. And I was even saying too, like one of my earliest influences was Arthur Adams, and I had no idea the work he had done at that point. I just knew what I knew. And I'd go to comic book shops and say, like, do you have any other Art Adams stuff? And sometimes I get a lead, or sometimes I'd be going through a long box and I discover like, oh my God, he did an annual for like, you know, America's Finest or or World's Finest. Like, it's kind of like you just like, and that was kind of exciting too, because there was just a mystery and a magic to discovering things. Now, in some ways, the internet's made everything so accessible. We almost dismiss it or take it for granted, or it's like, it's not, if I do want to know what Art Adams does now, it's so accessible. I almost dismiss it because it's like, oh yeah, I do have all that information, and I almost don't even like value it because it's like, it's now so easy to get. It's almost like I've heard the term cat string theory, where like a cat will like a string if you keep like making it challenging for it to get, but if you just give the string to the cat's bored and walks away. And I feel like sometimes the internet's like that for us. Like we have everything, and yet at the same time, we like weirdly dismiss it because it's just so taken for granted. I don't know. It's strange.
That's interesting because comics in particular, I remember, like you say, Art Adams did a Superman annual with John Byrne back in 1988.
That was the one I was thinking of, actually. I remember really discovering that in a long box.
And
with the vampires.
Yeah, the vampire one, a nice little twist. The Skeeter, it was called Skeeter, I think, the story.
Yeah.
And and if somebody mentioned that in an interview like this, you'd be then scanning long boxes for the next 6 months trying to find it,
Absolutely.
Whereas somebody listening to this can pause right now and go and find it on a Russian pirate site and just read
there's that too, yeah.
I wonder, Jake,
that's true.
Has comics lost something maybe as a result of that? The scarcity makes something a bit sexy, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're probably seeing that come back a little bit with the chase of like these variant covers, or now the newest thing with these blind bags. That's the new thing. I think, and I can see why that connects, because somebody like myself, if I'm collecting comics and I go into a shop and now there's this blind bag, I'm suddenly going to get that retro dopamine hit of Topps trading cards, of Star Wars cards or something like that. And it's going to take me back, and I'm going to go, oh yeah, that's like, I mean, I think that's, you mentioned too about, I wanted to circle back too. You mentioned too about like how creators are getting older now and kind of still being relevant. And I was just thinking of this recently because I remember when I first got into comic books, I was all about like Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, that whole Image crowd, and they were all barely in their 30s at that point. And the idea when I was getting into comic books, when I was in my, like, I think I broke in at 19, but let's just say 20. Like the idea of me like getting excited about comic book art by anybody older than the Image guys was just out of like my frame of reference. I was just like, now granted, as I got older, I did actually go and my range of appreciation got wider. But at that point, I would never even thought that anybody over 30 would have anything that I want to see, and so it is funny now, like that some of us are having longer careers, but I also think some of that's especially with comic books, we're all kind of playing the nostalgia angle a little too much, just like Hollywood is. Like we're kind of like, so having been in the business now for 30 years, I know a lot of the nostalgia buttons to push, but as a creator, we have to be self-aware that a lot of our buying public is aging out too. And if, as far as the future of comics and what we do, it is a question like, how do you reach that next generation? And I don't always know what that answer is, because again, I don't know where people who are like millennials, other than like, or not millennials, Gen Zs, I should say, I don't know where they're going to come across comic books now. Like, I don't know where they're going to discover them. Like, because I saw it when I would go to here in the States, we had 7-Eleven, and then you'd go there and you'd get candy and a Slurpee, and they had a little squeaky rack with all the comics. And I think my entry point too for comic books wasn't even like superheroes. It was because I was into G.I. Joe and Transformers, which had afternoon like shows. And then I saw there was a comic book, and then those comic books got me acclimated to comic books, which got me interested suddenly into X-Men and these other things. And I don't know where the funnel is anymore now for like getting younger people into this stuff, other than the fact that I think when you watch the Marvel movies now, I actually remember telling this to Art Adams, strangely enough, when about halfway through their first or second phase, remember they had like the Marvel logo at the beginning, and it would have the comic books flashing through the letters, and when they switched from the comic book images to the previous movies, that was where I was like, everybody from this point on is going to see Marvel as a movie company. It's not a comic book company. To every generation that's coming about now, like they will never think comics first. They'll think movies first.
That's what,
and I think that's interesting.
Do you know
what's that?
That's when Marvel movies went off the rails, though, wasn't it?
That's an interesting point too. I think you can make that argument. That is true. They got less appealing after that, for sure.
I think it became a snake eating its own tail. Instead of something that was adapting, from these guys who were geniuses like Kirby and Stan Lee and everybody, or Jerry Conway and all that, the later ones. Once they were bringing in guys and saying, "Hey, don't check out the comics, just do your own thing here." That's when it all. Yeah. I would say. People say 2019 is when Marvel went off the rails. I think it probably happened a little bit before that. Actually, I would say it was probably 2014 was peak Marvel. I think where you had Guardians of the Galaxy, Winter Soldier. You had a whole bunch of really good Marvel movies.
Yeah, I would tend to agree.
And there was a couple of good ones after that, like Avengers Endgame had some great stuff in it and everything, But I think it started to get a little more uneven by 2015, 2016. You had Age of Ultron, Captain Marvel, all that stuff. It was starting to look a little iffier, wasn't it? I think that's a great.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing they stuck the landing with the end game and that sort of those the pair of movies. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they age, because I think we all were so in the moment because we'd never seen anything like that. They literally got all those characters in those movies and that just seems so unheard of until we saw it. And I think they stuck that landing in an impressive way. But yeah, I think it's just, I don't know. I think maybe we're just desensitized now or we take it for granted. I think it's going to be interesting to see where this AI stuff takes it, because now we're just being inundated with, I mean, a lot of it's slop, but occasionally you'll see some AI stuff where you're like, that's disappointingly impressive. It's and it's only getting better and faster. So, but that also will just speed up our desensitizing to spectacle, I think, to some degree. And maybe that's a good thing, because maybe that means we have to kind of swing back to coming up with just really good ideas. I mean, I remember too when Tarantino first popped on the scene, and we were already kind of well into the summer blockbuster spectacle, momentum in the 90s. And then he kind of came along and did this kind of retro pulpy, gritty kind of style that was very stimulating to everybody and had nothing to do with summer spectacle. And so maybe that's what we need, is just kind of okay, all this AI stuff, just dump all the spectacle out so we visually just get over that and then get back to what is a good story and what are good characters,
I think you're 100% right. I think everything moves in cycles. And Tarantino was on a podcast last year, and he was talking about what it was like in 1992 when Reservoir Dogs appeared. And he said it was so depressing to be into film. I was a kid in the 80s, right? So I loved all the 80s films. But he said if you were 20-something and you grew up in 70s cinema, with Coppola and Scorsese and all this, and then you had 15 years of the Goonies and Ghostbusters 2 and all that, he said it was just depressing, So for him, this feels very much like the Marvel era's ended now, and what he was saying was it's amazing, the opportunity for a 25-year-old, a 28-year-old director to come in and do something that we've never seen and be as revolutionary as he was back then.
Oh, yeah.
Well, low-budget movie and characters that we've never seen before. To me, creatively, that feels more exciting than seeing a $500 million space movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's usually sometimes where I do butt heads or start to disagree with Tarantino, because he was such a 70s movie and he's really down on the 80s movies. And of course, I love so many of the 80s movies. So it's but I understand what he was saying. The 80s kind of were playing to a family audience, whereas the 70s had the grit. And I can see his influence from that. What I always loved about the 80s movies was it's all the IPs that were created that everybody keeps warming over now. It was just everything was a new idea. And I think we just thought that was going to keep going. In fact, I remember by the end of the 80s when they, did the Addams Family live action, where I remember thinking oh, that's funny. They took an old idea and they're making it new again. that seemed like a really wild idea. Now that's all we get. But back then it was oh, that's unusual. I wonder how that'll play out, And but it's we just took for granted that we were just like Back to the Future and Goonies and of course we had just come off of Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and everything was a new idea. And I think we just thought that train was going to go forever, and then you just very rarely get that anymore when it comes to them spending actual money on movies. And I mean, I recently kind of got nostalgic and went back and rewatched all the John Hughes movies and just really came away going God, that guy was such he was just on it, and he was just pumping out just great content. And I heard he would write his scripts in a weekend or something like that. And it's it was he was just so quick with it, and it's not it was garbage. It was, those movies are great, and I mean, maybe they aged out a little bit as far as people's what they find appropriate now, whatever it is. But I just think as a teenager back then, those movies felt real, and they felt like they actually were talking to you, not below you or sort of like, or polishing the teenage experience to be pretty or something like that. Those movies I thought really, watching them again, going back, I was like, man, he really knew teenagers. I mean, he really connected in a way that was just like, and I heard he would often talk to his cast and like get their take on things so he could kind of integrate that into the story so they would feel authentic and stuff like that. And again, you just don't, there's so much stuff you just don't get anymore. It's again, maybe on some level, I'm not a doom and gloom guy, but sometimes I think when I hear people say maybe Hollywood kind of needs to collapse and then build itself back up again, maybe there's some truth to that, because it's just the stuff right now just isn't working. I mean, it's not connecting or getting anybody excited.
Well, in terms of numbers, I mean, people always say that's an opinion, but when you look at empirical numbers, it's true.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. But I do think Hollywood seems to have an existential crisis, as does comic books, every generation, So like in the 50s, it was television. In the 80s, it was VCRs. Then it became streaming, but then Hollywood always goes away and then comes back with something new. So I think what I take comfort from is, like a movie like Sinners, which is a really fun film earlier this year.
Yeah.
Cost 80 million, made 340. Weapons, I think, cost about 30 million and made like...
Weapons is great, yeah.
Made 250 million or something, So, I mean, so you're seeing new creative ideas at that slightly lower budget, and maybe we just need a little bit of that again for a while. People trying. I
definitely agree.
And then those things will grow. There'll be Weapons 9.
Well, it's funny. It's almost like horror has been one of those genres, right? That kind of like they'll take a stab at a new idea with horror. Yeah. I don't know what it is. Like that's a genre that's kind of like, and how many directors have come up through horror? Like you get your James Gunns and you get a lot of these guys who like. They make their name in horror and then kind of go wider with their appeal. But it is, I think, if I was somebody, there was a point in time, I think when I was first drawing comic books where I thought it'd be some stepping stone to being a movie director. I've since dropped that. But if I was, I think I would go the horror route. And I'm not even a big horror guy. I mean, I did enjoy Weapons quite a bit, but like, I'm not like a super diehard horror guy, but I do think that is, if you're a creator, writer, director, that is the genre to go for, because you're right, that is the one that often has the new innovative ideas. I mean, Jordan Peele too, like when he made his move, he went that route, and I think you got some pretty cool ideas like through that, and I think if you go back and look at a lot of auteurs, as they say, like that seems to be a genre that you can keep the budget like contained and get a lot out of it, and people seem to be very open-minded when it comes to horror. I think maybe it's just the nature of the genre, right? They want to be surprised, and if you remake something, the surprise factor kind of goes away a little bit. You kind of know what to expect to some degree, and I think that's where a lot of the buzz and the dopamine comes from horror movies.
Well, the idea of taking a gamble on something like X-Men or Spider-Man now, the way that was in 2000, 2002, that's the unthinkable now, isn't it? People want a sure thing, something that's been tried before and just works. So that was a big roll of the dice back in the day. And even Iron Man, if Iron Man had bombed, the Marvel Studios thing would never have happened. They really needed that work. So, but when you're making $500 million Avengers movies, you can't really have anything that radical in there, because it has to make 1.2 billion to break even. Then
I know these budgets. When you read these articles about these budgets, I'm like, how on earth? Like how do they? I don't even understand how we've gotten to this point now where like. It's just like, I know there's inflation and stuff like that, but I'm a huge fan. In fact, I just watched it last night because we had some company in town, and we decided to watch the first Indiana Jones movie, which is like maybe my most favorite movie of all time, if not in the top 3.
Yeah.
And I remember reading articles. I've always read things about the making of movies in that era, and but it's funny to think too, like even though it was being made by George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, and they were both like rocketing to like stardom at that point. Mm-hmm. Steven Spielberg had just had a movie come out in 1941 that had underperformed, and he had gone over budget, and I guess he had gone long on like filming it. And just that minor infraction, even though he'd come off Jaws and come off of like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, they took the Indiana Jones budget from $12 million and rolled it back to 8 or something like that. Yeah. So like there was this whole like sequence at the beginning of the movie where they were going to show the temple that he's going into, and they're going to do all these like models. Yeah. They had to scale all of it back. And I think there was even a part 2 with the plane and the ark that was going to be bigger, and they had to scale it down because they were very disciplined back in that era. They're like, we know you guys are big shots, but this movie didn't perform. So you got to like get this one in on time and under budget. And there's no discipline like that these days. Now it's just like these budgets are insane. Like, how do they justify this? Especially, like I said, when, I mean, not to pick on Marvel, but, you know, we all know their run hasn't been super great in the last couple of years. And when I'm reading about this latest Avengers movie, I'm like, oh my God, they're never going to make this money back. I don't know. Again, that's probably why I'm not an executive, because I'm sure they space this out over like 8 years or 10 years, and it's a long game, I guess, or something. I don't know, but I don't get it.
Everybody's panicking, you know. But the thing is, nobody wants to make less money, you know. So like, I'm not taking a pay cut, you know. So
yeah, exactly. And if they're paying Robert Downey Jr. $200 million, I mean, like, oh my God, like how do they? It's just insane. It's like crazy business. I definitely can't understand it. I mean, as much as I can complain about comic books having things that don't make sense to me, that business just completely blows my mind.
The lights went out, the power went down, and then they made their move. A hole in space as big as the world opened up, and nobody could save us from what came through.
Hey folks, Mark Millar here to talk to you about Conquered, our brand new series on Kickstarter. The basic idea, Independence Day meets Game of Thrones. The idea of a portal opening up in the middle of New York City and dragons, barbarians, all these hordes coming in like from a fantasy novel and wiping out America, just taking the country down, and they've got their eyes on the rest of the world. I'd say it's probably the best drawn book I've ever been involved with.
Hi, I'm Valerio Giangiordano and I want to tell you about the biggest project of my career. I've previously worked with Mark Millar on Nemesis Rogues Gallery and with Todd McFarlane on Spawn series, but this is my first huge creator-owned title, and I've been secretly working on this since the beginning of the year. Conquered is an enormous challenge as an artist. The entire world at war with a fantasy world. It's very difficult because I'm creating everything from the ground up. But it's so much fun to draw, and we have got the biggest visual here like you've never seen in a comic book before.
A really weird thing about Conquered is it's actually the very first proposal I ever sent into a comic book company. The artwork is a little bit better than my originals, Lee felt pens. When I was 13 years old, I sent it to Julie Swartz at DC Comics in New York. I got a nice letter back, a rejection letter, but here we are, 40 years later, and it's finally happening.
Conquered is an insane project and I can't wait to have it on my shelves. We are doing this over 4 volumes and the first is available now on Kickstarter.
But I think it's a bit like, you know, people get fat and then they realise they're going to have a heart attack, so they lose some weight, and then they slowly put weight on again. And I think Hollywood's always done this. You know, Cleopatra freaked everybody out, and they were like, this will never happen again. Heaven's Gate freaked everybody out, this will never happen again. But they trim, and then they make a little money. And it's kind of like Vegas, you know, people like to be high rollers. And it's weird. I mean, I'll give you an example. We did Wanted for 70 million and it made 340 million, which is amazing, right? Like 5 times.
That's amazing. That's what you want.
Yeah, but it sounds much more impressive when we say, oh, Kingsman did 425, even though Kingsman cost 81, you know? So like, people just see the bottom line, they just see the big number. So if you say if your movie made 1.5 billion, but it cost 500 million, nobody notices the 500 million part.
Definitely not. No, definitely not. Yeah. No, even that steaming pile of garbage, that last Star Wars movie that closed out that awful trilogy they did. I think it just came out that movie cost way more money than they had actually originally even announced. And it made $1 billion, but nobody thinks highly of that movie. It just made over $1 billion by sheer momentum of Star Wars existing, really, pretty much. And it's just like, but what came of it at the end? At the end of the day, it's like that brand is so damaged, and it's just remarkable to think that like how do you do that? That's the level of incompetence to take Star Wars and to put it into a situation where it's completely gone off the rails and it's in a ditch right now. I don't know. It breaks my heart. I just go like, that's why I don't want to be that cynical guy. Like obviously there's so many YouTube channels of just people just complaining about everything under the sun when it comes to entertainment these days. But even as an optimistic person, you kind of have to just kind of shake your head and go, God, like I want to root for this stuff, but so much of it's just such garbage right now.
Do you not think I've been obsessed with this for about a year and a half, and I was thinking 1977, I was 7 years old when Star Wars came out, and if my dad had been saying, oh, Star Wars looks terrible, they're bringing back Johnny Weissmuller to play Tarzan, I'd be like, what are you talking about, and we're now as far away from that as so I just feel like just let these things die. I mean, I love them.
Yeah.
They can remain on my shelves as DVDs, and I love to go back and look at them. But we don't need Star Wars Episode 27 and all that.
No, we absolutely do not.
No,
we don't. And that's I think that's kind of the hard lesson we've all just kind of had to come to accept, really. And also too, I don't think the younger generation is that excited by Star Wars. They're making Star Wars now to just please guys like you and me, and we're kind of like over it. Like, so it's like, we can go back and watch our, like you said, our originals, and that's, I mean, even too, I mentioned we watched Raiders of the Lost Ark last night, and that we were talking about like, oh, like should we see the other ones? And I said, like, watch the first 3. I don't think you need the other 2. And that's kind of like my attitude about a lot of things now. It's like, okay, I can compartmentalize and just block out these other versions of things and kind of go, it's like, like Boba Fett was one of my all-time favorite characters as a kid. And my God, Disney has ruined that character. And I'm like, I can block it out. I can compartmentalize. Boba Fett can be cool in my memory of him, and I'll just pretend the other thing didn't happen. And I agree with you. I think some of this stuff just kind of has to die, because I think I just don't think. Once in a while we get somebody who steps in and can take a legacy who didn't invent it and do something amazing with it. One of the all-time best examples, I think, was when James Cameron came on to do the sequel for Alien. It's like he didn't invent Alien, he didn't direct the first one, but God, he added to the lore in a way that is, very rare. I mean, like
6 years later, though, I mean, I think you've got to be in that Alien moment, haven't you?
Yeah.
40 years later is much. It's a bigger task.
Yeah, you do find it's rarer. You're right. When that much time goes by, it becomes less and less likely that somebody's going to come along and add to the lore in a meaningful way. I'm sure there's examples that you and I probably aren't thinking of right now, but it's fair. I'm sure we could count it on one hand. I mean, it's just like, it's like most of it, as we all know, is just retread and warming it over, and it's not as good. And,
well, you say that, but this is what we do for a living, which is to create new things.
Yeah.
So like Danger Girl, for example, or Gen 13, or whatever, these things didn't used to exist, and now they do because you created them, And
that's true.
At some point, these are going to be mass media, whether it's in 2 years' time or 20 years' time or whatever, will be mass media, well-known mainstream things, because that appetite is going to move on to, okay, what else have we got? Nobody cares about X-Men anymore. What else do we have?
Well, that is kind of the interesting thing because I know it's a dirty word right now to sort of like even consider where AI could potentially take things, but that is the one aspect that's kind of intriguing to me, because these, like we were saying, these budgets have gotten so overblown and so big, and an idea like Danger Girl, while I've been approached over the years multiple times to turn it into like a movie or a show or something like that, I can also see the hesitation that it is not Spider-Man, and it does not have the wide knowledge of just like existing. It's got a value and it's got niche appeal, but to blow up and get bigger. I think
a great concept. I mean, like I say, nobody heard of Kingsman. We made 425 million. So like, and The Matrix at one time didn't exist, and then it existed. So I think your stuff's very commercial, actually. And there's hardly any issues of it, and yet everybody loves it. You know
what it is, I think, and this is what keeps coming up is they can't help but analyze demographics. And when you get a movie like Furiosa that comes out and bombs, and then you get a movie like The Ballerina that comes out and bombs, or then they revamp Charlie's Angels for the gazillionth time and it comes out and bombs, like that, by just being a female driven action property, already you're on an uphill climb because they want to see something that existed and did well. And then they can say, oh, that's yours will do well then too, because now this female action genre also too, we're kind of coming out of again, not to bring up Star Wars again, but I think Star Wars was a very discussed example of this, where you created a female protagonist, but you overpowered her, and then it kind of now ushered in the backlash of the girl boss, like like she's, or perhaps Captain Marvel fell in that situation too. The idea that there's no obstacles for these characters, they just kind of are gifted amazing abilities to kind of like make up for maybe a demographic that was maybe underserved in the earlier years of Star Wars. So now we're going to like over deliver this powerful character. And then in the end, obviously we both know a character is not compelling when they're overpowered and don't really have a lot of trials and tribulations to overcome. And I think that's unfortunately hurt properties like Danger Girl, because now people are just too quick to recoil and say, oh, girl boss, like, yeah. And it's like, well, no, actually in our series, like, she has to overcome a ton of obstacles. She does not just get gifted or handed success. And in fact, that was one of my biggest influences when I was doing Danger Girl, was I loved how often Indiana Jones got knocked down and like would constantly have to like pick himself back up. That's what made him such a compelling and likable character. And I always wanted to impart that into my stories. But I think, again, we just go through these cycles, right? It's like right now it's like girl action things just look like they underperform, or people don't want to see them. Well, and I don't know.
And yes, it was all that was getting made for a while, from 2016 until probably 2022, till about Top Gun Maverick. Just being inside the studios, I would see it all the time, that people would say, how do we make this more female friendly? But I think the mistake that they made was to take iconic male characters that people liked and then had a female character replace them. I think that instead of being something in its own right, the Danger Girl's its own character. So I think that's more value than here's the new Indiana Jones and it's a girl, or here's the new Luke Skywalker and it's a girl. Like, to me, that's a very tough sell, because the traditional audience isn't going to like it, and the girls don't really care. So.
Well, also too, and we all know girls already liked Star Wars. They liked Star Wars with the guy leads. I mean, it's like, I'm not saying you couldn't have a girl Jedi, but it was such an odd move in hindsight, because you read all these articles that Disney bought Star Wars because they wanted to broaden their appeal with boys, because they had all the princesses. Yeah. And then they went on to basically create a version of it that boys just, and listen, I mean, little boys, they're not thinking politically. They're not thinking about what they should do or that they should appreciate a girl lead. They're just little boys and they want to play with boy toys. And that's just how it is. And that's why Star Wars always appealed to them. And I think it's just how boys have always been when they're like preteen or pre-puberty. They want to, like, they're going to buy the boy toys and they're going to be like, I mean, when I was a kid, like, I grew up to love Princess Leia, but she was always the peg warmer. She was not, Han Solo and Luke Skywalker were always sold out. And anybody who knows anything should know that. And again, with Danger Girl, I think it wouldn't really be a great toy brand, but it would definitely fall into that Kill Bill range, where it's like, it could be a really cool, fun, property that would kind of fall into that like 20 to 30-year-old like audience kind of, and I still think they would be really cool. And you never know. I mean, people circle back occasionally and find interest in trying to develop it again. But again, I think that's where I've often found the roadblock is just this constantly overanalyzing. Well, what's the female action movie that made a lot of money? So they've got to like find it, and then if it doesn't exist in the last 5 or 10 years, then they're not touching it, because that's just not a demographic.
I mean, that's one thing I've realized with film, is it's like the stock market. If something is part of a hot trend, everybody jumps on it, and the minute the buzz goes round that it's not off it, So, and like we say, for 6 or 7 years, girl action movie was all that was being developed, like everywhere, you know. But I don't think it was well served, because I think Danger Girl would be great. You could make it for about $60 million, probably do a really good one for like $60 million, get the faces up front and everything. I'm sure it will happen, But to circle back a little bit, I know that you come in on one of these talent searches back in the day, I remember hearing that you didn't read comics really as a little kid. Like
that's true.
You weren't a comic guy then. So how did you find out about the talent search? Were you just a guy who liked drawing, and then you heard about the talent search, or had you got
no? But by the time the talent search came around, I was into comic books enough. Like I think for the longest time I loved to draw as far back as I can remember.
Yeah.
So that was always in the cards. Now where I was going to take that, there was a lot of different avenues. So I kind of kept drawing. In fact, actually, I kind of lingered in an area of underdeveloped knowledge of drawing probably longer than I should have, because I was always like copying things. Like if I saw Garfield, I would just draw Garfield a bunch or something like that, because I could kind of figure out what that looked like. And and then very early on, I discovered Mad Magazine before I discovered comic books. Wow. I was so into Star Wars, for bring back that part of the conversation, that I remember like going to the grocery store. And again, this is why I keep coming back to it. Like, I don't know where people discover these mediums now, maybe Instagram or something like that. But these were my entrances to what I do now. And one of them was discovering Mad Magazine at the grocery store. My parents were at the grocery store. And it was Alfred E. Newman's face on Yoda. Right. Like, and I was like, what is this? Like, this is weird. I picked it up and I was flipping through, and I was like, and it's all drawings, of course, black and white. But they were doing, I think, a parody of The Empire Strikes Back, and it was called The Empire Strikes Black or something like that, something stupid like that. But I loved this guy's art style, and later I found out it was this artist Mort Drucker who did these amazing,
the greatest
caricatures.
Yeah, amazing.
He's like the Norman Rockwell of like Mad Magazine, and so that was one of my earliest influences, was trying to figure out how he did caricatures and likenesses so well. In fact, I was teaching myself to do that long before I was figuring out superhero anatomy and stuff like that. Like I was definitely in the dark with that, but I was teaching myself how to like figure out facial expressions and rendering styles with ink and stuff like that, because Mad Magazine had a lot of that. And like I said, I mentioned I became interested in G.I. Joe and Transformers because of afternoon cartoon shows. So then I started collecting the Marvel comics of those, because they would literally run commercials for the Marvel comics in between the cartoon, which was
really?
To this day, I don't think you can actually look up these commercials on YouTube. They're really great, but they would do an animated sequence for about 20 seconds for a commercial. And then at the very end, they would give you like a little bit of a cliffhanger, and then it would spin, and then you see the comic book, and it would say, read about it in the pages of Marvel Comics. And I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And again, it's crazy looking back on now, because that they actually advertised Marvel Comics with that kind of budget, where they had full-blown animation and everything like that.
And that's how you discovered Marvel Comics then? It was through...
I think I was aware. I was always aware of Spider-Man. So I think I watched Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends and these kinds of things. And in fact, actually, when I was fortunate enough to meet Stan Lee years ago, what pushed my buttons the most was I remembered Stan Lee doing the voiceovers at the beginning of Spider-Man and the Amazing Friends and the Incredible Hulk. He would like, "Hey, true believer," like in this tale of whatever. And so that voice was so iconic in my head just from seeing it as a kid, the cartoon. But so I was always aware of Marvel characters in that respect, in a very sort of broad sense. And I think I had the X-Men pilot that they made a pilot to the X-Men cartoon that didn't get picked up, but they sold it as a VHS tape. So I had this one episode of the X-Men where they fight the Juggernaut. I guess they ultimately decided not to make it into a show, but they sold it as a videotape.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I went to a friend's house who I also enjoyed drawing with, and he had an Art Adams X-Men Annual. It was X-Men Annual number 10. And he told me, he goes, "Oh, this guy who's drawing this comic, you really got to check it out. He's really good." And he was 100% right. Like, I flipped this comic book and I was obsessed with Arthur Adams' drawing style. It just looked different. It hit different than I'd ever seen a comic book style hit. And I immediately was like, "Oh, I've got to track this comic book down." And I think only recently before that had I discovered that comic book shops even existed, because I had been buying the G.I. Joe and Transformers comics on squeaky racks, and I was missing issues. Sometimes I'd miss one month because my mom didn't take me to the store. So I remember, like, the very first time I walked by a comic book store going like, "What in the hell? Like, these things exist. And I remember like being so excited to find the back issues of G.I. Joe I was missing so I could piece together the story. So I knew at that point, I knew comic book shops existed. So when I saw this Art Adams annual, I went to a comic book shop and tracked it down so I could have my own copy of it. And I think at that point, things pivoted very dramatically. I think up until that point, I thought maybe as with the artistic style I had, I would probably become a Disney animator or something like that.
Yeah.
But comic books really started steering me away from that. And then, of course, I think not too long after I was collecting Art Adams, the comic book shop got used to me coming around and asking if they had any more Art Adams. And Art Adams never really did a monthly series. He always just did like annuals and things like that. So there wasn't this huge amount of Art Adams content other than the back catalog. And I remember one time I went in there and the guy said, "Oh, you might want to check out this other guy who's doing Spider-Man right now. His name's Todd McFarlane." He goes, he kind of looks a little bit like Art Adams, but like a little messier. That was how he described it. And then I got into like collecting Spider-Man at that point. And then not too long after I discovered Jim Lee because he was blowing up at that time. So by the time the talent search came around, I had probably been collecting Jim and Todd for like a good 2, maybe 3 years. And they had, of course, broken off to start Image Comics. And it was in the back of, I think, Jim's second Wildcats book that he started with at Wildstorm. I don't think he called it Wildstorm at that point. It was Image Comics. And there was a talent search in the back of it, which was amazing because I had been going to, in Colorado, we didn't have like Comic-Con. We had like little tiny comic book shows that would be in the bottom of like I don't know if this is how it is sometimes in the UK back in the day, but it would be like a lobby of a hotel, and then there'd be a few, there'd be like a few dealers, and maybe you'd get like talent that would be flown in to kind of draw some interest. And in that time, I got to meet Sam Keith. He came through, and I was not in the business at that point, but he was really kind. I was asking all questions like, "What do you draw with? What's the pen you use? Like, what size paper?" Like all those like nerdy questions that, like I said, you just wouldn't get. There wasn't YouTube to answer these questions. You'd have to hunt down this information. And that was really educational for me to kind of like get a little bit of a working knowledge. So by the time this talent search came along, I kind of had taught myself a lot about like, okay, if you're going to send in samples, send in 2 or 3 interior pages, send in a cover and maybe a pinup or something like that kind of. And then because it was Jim looking for talent, I was like, I had some Marvel samples I kind of put together, which probably would have done the job. But I was so like, oh, I'm not going to miss this opportunity. I scrapped that and in like a week's time produced sample pages for Wildcats, because that was his characters. And I was like, I need to make this as little friction as possible. He needs to be able to see that I can draw his characters in a cool way that looks like something that he would probably want to hire somebody to do. And so I did custom Wildcats like sample pages, and on top of that I made the Xeroxes of them, folded them into a manila envelope because that's how we sent them, of course, back in the day, no internet. And then on the envelope I drew even more drawings because I wanted him to see the envelope and go, I've got to open this today, I can't just put this on the pile, and all of this worked. All of this worked. He like called me within a week of sending it in, and I was like, oh my god, this totally worked. And very quickly he offered, he said, hey, would you be interested in relocating to San Diego and being an intern? And I was like, this is 19-year-old me again too. So I was like excited, but a little bit, scared at the same time, but like I wasn't going to miss that opportunity.
What's your family say? Because 19's young to go from Denver, Colorado to California, were your family scared, or did they think it was a good idea? I think looking back on it, I think my mom might have been a little bit taken aback by it. I think she was pretty sad when I moved out because it all happened so fast once it started going. But at that point, I had been out of high school for about a year and a half. Yeah, and I told them I was going to pursue comic books, and I needed about like 6 months to a year to like get my portfolio together and kind of like really focus on this skill set. And I was probably just about getting to that point where my mom was wondering if I was just going to like
not add up to anything. So I think in that sense, they were probably relieved and excited for me. I think looking back on it, but you're right. I mean, like I have got a 20 and a 22-year-old daughter now. And it's weird for me to think that I was doing that at 19 when I can now picture what the age they're at now. And that seems like crazy if they were to suddenly do that.
There's just some guy, I draw comic books.
I know.
Come and live with me.
I know, exactly. That is pretty funny. But, and also too, that's funny too, is I was one of like 3 or 4 guys he pulled out of this search, and by the time I got there, they each like had their own apartments already. I think they'd got there like a month before.
Who were the other guy?
And Brett Booth was the first one he pulled in.
He's great, yeah.
And then Alex Garner, who I ended up working with on Gen 13 and later on Danger Girl, he was pulled in before me as well. And I think I was like the third guy. I think I was the third guy that was pulled in. And again, too, I was super quick sending my samples in. I was almost shocked there was anybody there before me. But I think it took about a month for me to get my stuff in order to kind of make the move. Yeah. And the funny thing, too, is I literally moved all my stuff out there, too. Like, I was so overconfident. I don't think I even thought that maybe this wouldn't work out. I literally had a U-Haul trailer that my grandparents helped drive me down to, like, San Diego. And I moved all this stuff into the temporary apartment. And then I very quickly, like within a week, found my own apartment and signed the lease for that. And I was like, looking back on it, I'm like going like, what if this didn't work out? I was way overconfident, but thank God it did. But I was just so convinced that this is it. And I'm just full on going forward and I'm not looking back.
I think you almost need to be like that, don't you, as well? You
do, yeah.
Like if you meet comic guys when they're young, we're all psychopaths. Like we actually, we can't,
you're totally right.
We can't believe we're not making it already. We're like,
that's true. That's totally true. No, you're totally right. I it's funny because people often ask, they go like, "Oh, you're ever going to get back to interiors and stuff like that?" And there's this, of course, this part of me that always like has it in me to do more interiors.
Yeah.
But I'm like so intimidated by it now. And when I was 20, I was like, bring it on. Like I'll try anything. Now I'm like, oh my God, if I commit to that, like what's my next 3 years going to be like? And will I be able to go on a vacation? And like now I just like, I obsess about it. I'm like, do I have enough time in the day? Because what if my daughters need me for something? But back then I was like, yeah, I would happily draw until like 3 a.m. and then get up at 9 and do it again. And like, you're right. That's the great thing about being young and that you don't know what you don't know, and you'll take on the craziest stuff and it'll get done. I mean, it won't always be the prettiest thing because you're learning and you're not seasoned, but yeah, I do sometimes miss that fearlessness. I mean, there is something about that age where we just like, we'll take it on. You
would get into Jim's physical studio in La Jolla, weren't you? Like the
yeah.
It's funny because we grew up hearing about the Marvel bullpen and everything, and I assumed that all these guys all worked in one big office, which wasn't the case. But Jim did create that, didn't he? I mean, Jim actually had a bullpen.
He did. Yeah, I know what you mean, because they used to have those drawings sometimes in the Marvel annuals where they would have a drawing of the bullpen and they'd make all the desks around. You did get the sense they were all in like just some high rise somewhere. Yeah. But yeah, Jim did do that. He had like, in fact, actually, it was the office I started off wasn't even the La Jolla office. That was still a year or two away. This was like the office. It was in Mira Mesa. It was just an office building. I think he had one of the floors, and then there was another one that was like an accountant, and then the bottom floor was just where all the cars parked. And it was just like an office, really. There was like a ping pong table in the back. And Jim had an office in the back. I don't remember ever really going in that office. Maybe I peeked in it once, but Jim was never in that office, to his credit. Yeah. He was always out in a very humble, simple, like $99 desk you get at any art store. Like, and we all had these like art desks, just like kind of in a circle kind of. Mm. And we'd all just draw out there and like, kind of like, just look over, and then just sometimes you have a radio on. I seem to be the DJ person because I always like to listen to music I was the one who got the boombox, and I was always like, back then I was always going to like Tower Records and buying like 6 new CDs because I always wanted to constantly be listening to things. And that was a good era to be buying music. That was the early 90s. So the alternative thing was blowing up and everything. But it was a cool vibe. It was really exciting. Again, looking over Jim's shoulder and seeing him draw like right in front of me was like, it in a great way demystified it, because I would put it on such a pedestal that to see sort of just how it came together, it was so awesome. And at the same time, like, it was breathtaking how effortless it was in some ways, because I was not at that stage at all. But it did make it believable, like, and accessible. I was going like, oh, that's how he does it. He just makes these shapes and he fills it in. And in fact, too, I remember even going to the Xerox machine sometimes, and there was this pile of Xeroxes. So if you flip down far enough in the Xeroxes, you saw Xeroxes of X-Men pages. They just hadn't moved yet and stuff like that. That's how fresh X-Men was in history for them. Like, because this was the office they drew the X-Men pages in. And it was an amazing time, very magical. And I'm very grateful that Jim had that spirit, like you said, of the bullpen and stuff like that, because he could have just stayed in his office and we could have just been like out there like trying to figure it out, but he was very hands-on in that way.
Yeah, it's a bit like, when the Beatles appeared, it meant that probability bent and all these Northern English bands all suddenly appeared, and similarly, Alan Moore in 1983 breaks into DC Comics, and then suddenly you've got this British invasion of people. You see one guy doing it, it's like seeing the fish crawling out of the sea onto the land, isn't it?
Right.
And Jim,
it makes it believable
for you guys. It just suddenly a guy whose flesh and blood is doing this for a living,
Yeah, it's probably very similar in that sense, because there was like this, and I mean, comics in that, what was it? It was 1991, 92. I mean, they were as big as anything back then. It was like, I mean, comic books really, people, unless it's you or I or of our generation to live through it, people don't realize how big comic books had gotten at that point. I mean, X-Men had just sold like 8 million copies.
Yeah,
and
that's crazy.
There were like literally, I remember too, that helped with my parents too, with like moving, because I remember pointing out the Rob Liefeld commercial for Levi's jeans. I don't know if they had that in the UK, but like Rob Liefeld had a commercial on TV for Levi's jeans with Spike Lee directing it. It was crazy. Yeah. And it's just like, so like, I think it just seemed like it was such a moment, and sometimes I'm a little bit sad, because even though I got in at 19, I kind of still feel like I got in right as it was cresting a little bit, that really big moment, because I remember when we solicited Gen 13, my first comic book, it was called Gen X originally. Yeah. We solicited it, and Rob Liefeld and his guys had already kind of got a couple of their little, we sometimes refer to them as little buddy comic books, and that because that was like, it was Rob's little buddies and Jim's little buddies. And a couple of Rob's little buddy comics had already hit and come out, and they sold like 1 million copies. I remember going like, wow, like these guys, they came out of nowhere and they're selling 1 million copies. And I remember when we put Gen X out, we were a little bit further behind. We got orders and they were something like 600,000. And I remember being disappointed, going like, oh, only 600,000. Well, it gets worse, Mark, because like we had to resolicit because Marvel said, you can't use Gen X. We're about to come out with our own Gen X book. We had to scrap the solicitation because apparently you couldn't just rename it. You had to literally resolicit. Yeah. So we had to scrap those orders, resolicit as Gen 13, which was a little bit of a blessing because I was kind of running behind. Yeah. And so it gave me another couple months. So as Gen 13, we resolicit. The orders then come in at 170,000.
Oh, no.
At this point, I'm like devastated. I'm like, oh my God, like this is so bad. But it was probably the blessing in disguise because that comic came out and it was gone. Like it came out and it's all anybody was talking about because it flew off the shelves. It was scarce. Yeah. Everybody wanted it. We immediately made a second print. Yeah. And it was like lightning in a bottle because all these extreme comics that like had 1 million copies were still sitting there on the shelves. Mm-hmm. But because ours was scarce and people were being a little more cautious about how they ordered, right? I think that probably was the best thing that could have happened because it was all like skyrocketing after that.
But it is amazing because you had that wave of guys, you know, that Steel Forges Steel thing, you know, where you had Todd and Jim and Rob and Eric and everybody all turning each other into superstars because you got into one guy, you get into the other guy. And then very quickly, 2 years later, probably you had you guys coming in. Yeah. There was your little wave, you know, like Travis Charest and people like that.
Yeah, Travis was in the studio that I was discussing. That he was in that little round table area. And then later in La Jolla, Travis, myself, Alex Garner, and then his inker all shared a quad studio space. That was really quite something. But I keep going.
Campbell says it's a bit like, you know, sports where you don't just get one guy, you get like a whole load of guys at once and then they compete with each other. And you know, back to your what Rob's guys are doing, you know, and what numbers are doing, that makes you try harder and so on, you know. I think there's something quite special happens then, isn't there?
Yeah, no, I mean, there was like, I remember too, like, and Joe Mad was already kind of coming in at like Marvel. So I could tell I could quickly pick up on like, ooh, he's got the Art Adams influence too, but he's kind of going this way and I'm going this way. And you keep an eye on each other. And then Michael Turner came up and then like, he was probably about a year behind me. And so I saw the Witch when I was Gen 13 was already on its way, but then I saw the Witchblade stuff popping up. I was like, oh, he's doing the hot girl thing too. I better keep an eye on this guy. like we all were like watching each other, but it was good because again, the competition pushed us. We all wanted to like be the guys who break out and that kind of thing. And by the time Cliffhanger with Danger Girl and stuff like that, I think a lot of the guys like out of all that whole new wave, fortunately I was one of the handful ones that kind of like crawled to the top kind of in that second wave. I used to always think it was myself and Turner and Joe Mad and of course Travis was doing his thing. And, at that point, I think Umberto Ramos had kind of come into the mix too. So that at that point, our generation was firmly in place, that sort of tier underneath the Image guys, like right behind them. And it was cool. It was a cool time to be aware of that, but also realize there's still a lot to be done and you still had to prove yourself every day and every issue,
What you guys had in common, which I hadn't thought about until you mentioned it 20 minutes ago, was that slight Disney style to your art. I know there was the Art Adams influence is huge through all of your guys, but that kind of mid-80s Disney style is kind of in all your art as well, isn't it? Which that was huge. In fact, that was huge for me, especially at Jim's studio, because I think that gave me a secret sauce that a lot of the other guys that he brought in didn't really bring to the table. I think I had, like, especially with Gen 13 too. I mean, when I locked in on that, because Jim had a lot of different titles he was going to develop, and I just happened to lock in when he showed me Gen 13. I was like, oh, I would love to do that book, Jim. If you're looking to develop that, I'm your guy. I think that's something I could do really well with. And sure enough, because of the female characters, and it wasn't just because I like to draw. I just always had a knack for drawing the female characters, probably because of I was studying the Disney stuff and Little Mermaid and Jessica Rabbit and all this kind of stuff. So I did take some of that into there, but also too the expressions. Like, you have to remember too, like in that early 90s, as good as everybody was, they were kind of falling a little bit in their cliches. Like even Jim was doing a little too much of the cross hatching and the gritty teeth and stuff like that. And I was like, I think I want to bring this like Disney influence in with the expressions of the girls' faces. If you look at like that first Gen 13 miniseries, there's a lot of like the Little Mermaid and like the face of like Caitlin Fairchild in Gen 13 and that kind of thing. And I think that really helped like carve out a niche for me where I think that really kind of set me apart very early on from looking too cookie cutter. Cause obviously if you're in a studio environment like that, you're gonna look like Jim because it's Jim's studio and we're all learning from him. But that was a good way to sort of break away a little bit. I mean, people often even told me that like they would tap me on the shoulder after like Gen 13 took off and they go like, Jim's drawing his eyes a little bit bigger now. So like, I don't know if that was true, but I did take that as flattery because I think it was clicking. Like I was doing something, and a lot of people mistook it as anime. I mean, I liked anime to some degree. I think that was more Joe Mad's like avenue. I think he was very anime influenced, but I was really just pulling in a lot of that Disney stuff. And to this day, it's still very in there. It's in my secret sauce. Like I think I'm always like, because it gives animation just brings so much life to drawing, especially when you've only got like one frame to really show it. You want to punch it as much as you can with the expressions. So that cartooniness I think was just always there from the beginning. Probably a lot to do with the Disney stuff. Anna Adams is an interesting one, isn't it? Because all the artists I know who are about 48 to about 53 or something, you can really see Art Adams in their work. And Art Adams' body of work, because he's quite a meticulous artist and quite slow, it's quite small. His body of work is quite small. And yet his footprint with the next generation is crazy. Bigger than Jim and Todd and all those guys.
Yeah, well, that's just it. I kind of think, there's Art Adams in Todd, there's Art Adams in Jim, there's Art Adams in Rob. And they just found a way to do it faster. They found a way to kind of like cut some corners. They weren't as meticulous, but they were able to push a lot of the buttons, especially Jim in a lot of ways. Like I think he was able to formalize it in a way that like, I mean, obviously there's other things. There's Neil Adams and Jim, and Jim's got a lot of other stuff, but I definitely locked in on the Art Adams influence on Jim, and that definitely Todd, you see it. And Rob was probably the most blatant with like, sort of like the, but you're right. I kind of feel like he's almost like the Phantom Image founder, because he wasn't an Image founder, but everybody kind of leapfrogged off of what he was doing. And I know a lot of people say too, like later on, I found out that there's a lot of Michael Golden in Arthur Adams, and I can see it. And there's a lot of like, I mean, also Arthur was very influenced by Frank Miller at a certain point, but I generally think what the Image guys took was pure art. It wasn't Michael Golden and Frank Miller as much. And yeah, that part always kind of like, in some weird way, I'm still kind of, I mean, Art's had an amazing career. He's done very well, but I just, in some ways, I always thought he was the unsung, like kind of hero of like that generation, because you're right. I think all the roots kind of, to me, come from Art Adams when I look at it.
It's kind of weird though, because Frank Miller was such a colossus, and so was John Byrne and so on. You know, like these guys had huge bodies of work that were very well known, you know, and yet there's not that many Frank Miller clones, and there's not that many John Byrne clones.
True.
But
good point.
Adams influenced, off the top of my head, I could name 10 guys who were really,
maybe it was because like there was something about Art, the way he was drawing, that was very seductive to figure it out or something like that. Like I don't like, there's a structure to his figures that's still the bones of, to this day, the bones of like what my style has morphed and changed over the years. Yeah. But if you peel away a lot of the onion, it's the structure of how I draw figures is still very much in Art Adams. Like he has a way where he, you know, like that pose of Wolverine, like I still can't draw Wolverine without thinking of that pose. You know, it's like it's just like, or like there's the way the girls stand with their hips out and their leg kind of kicked out. It's like I still, to this day, it's been 30 years, I still keep seeing Arthur Adams drawing every character. Yes. And then I have to kind of convince myself to not just do that. You know, so I don't know. It is interesting, because you're right. I mean, those other guys are giants in the industry and should probably have a bigger footprint. But it's funny how sometimes that happens. Sometimes guys just come along, or like even Magnolia. I mean, like you never mistake his work, and maybe there's been a guy here or there who's like done a Hellboy comic that kind of did a Magnolia thing, but for the most part, people just let Magnolia do that. They don't try to do that style, you know, kind of. And I think something about Arthur Adams was maybe just malleable to like a lot of other ways of drawing or something. I don't know. It is interesting. I mean, Jim Lee kind of had that effect too. Like there was, of course, all the Jim Lee clones in the late 90s where everybody was, anybody who got an X-Men did a kind of a knockoff of Jim's style until Joe Mad came along. Yeah. You know? Yeah.
And then you sidestepped, you know, sort of from comics, you know, after Danger Girl, you went into gaming, you know, and I always think it's funny, like quite a lot of my friends have done this over the years. You know, they're maybe brilliant comic book guys, great at designing stuff. So they'll maybe get more money for less grind. You know, you're not sitting up all night having to do 6 pages a week and everything, you know. But
for sure.
I talk to a lot of actors who say to me they love doing theatre because the audience is seeing what they can really do, you know, and they see the audience's reaction to what they can do. Whenever you're doing game stuff, do you miss the fact that a mass audience isn't seeing your actual pen and inks and they're only seeing the finished result? You know, like, is that what draws you back to comics? Do you miss that direct interface with an audience that comics has got?
Well, I think you might be thinking of Joe Mad, because Joe Mad was the one who went really into it. I mean, to this day, I think Joe Mad is still very much entrenched in the gaming thing. Yeah. We did do a Danger Girl video game though, so I did dabble in that a little bit. But I'm totally with you actually in the sense, because I've had a very tough time doing the kind of art that's not seen by people. Like I do have an issue with that, and I think that's why it's been hard for me to be pulled into anything like development work or.
Oh, I thought you had. I mean, you had been doing that over the years.
No, not really. I mean, the only thing I've really been a lot of the artwork that people sometimes don't see is I do a lot. It's funny how many I've lost count on, but I've done a lot of statue design. In fact, you can kind of see some of them back here. And like at this point, I think I've designed, oh gosh, like maybe 20 statues for Sideshow, whether it's Spider-Man or my own fairy tale line. I've done a bunch of statues with McFarlane. McFarlane did the Danger Girl toys, which I also, so I do a lot of development and turnaround when I'm working on these statues and stuff like that. But the good thing is like those still can be seen. I'm big on like producing sketchbooks and any kind of, like, that's something that's a real passion of mine. I really love this modern era now where artists can self-produce a lot of this kind of content. You know, like we can sell it on our websites. We can sell it at like comic book shows. And the idea like that, one of the first things I did like that was the Danger Girl sketchbook. I remember pitching that to DC at the time. Danger Girl had wrapped up the miniseries, and I was like, guys, I have all these drawings for the Danger Girl video game. I have all of these development sketches for the toys. I have all of these characters, concept sketches. And I remember really pushing to do this Danger Girl sketchbook at the time. It was going to be this kind of this hodgepodge. I think I had at that time I had the Bill Sienkiewicz sketchbook that I always loved flipping through. And but I remember like DC was really kind of like prickly about it. They were like, man, we don't want to do this. And I was kind of going like, what? Like that was the first time I was kind of told no, because like I was kind of getting away with murder up until that point. And but they did eventually allow me to do this Danger Girl sketchbook. Well, it was a big success. I think they ended up reprinting it 4 times. Wow. It was just kind of funny. But ever since then, I've always like, even like I said, even a development drawing or a scrap, I always want to publish it because I hate the idea of anything I draw not making it into the hands of the audience. In fact, I am a stickler to this day where I will not do convention sketches. I will not do commissions. Once in a while, I get talked into one, but it's begrudgingly. And that's because I want as much of my art to be published as possible.
You're right.
Yeah, I mean, so mostly what I've been doing in the last several years is just I do a lot of covers. And then even better in the last probably 10 years, I've been able to do a lot of the exclusive covers, more specifically exclusive covers I commission myself to do through my web store. Yeah. And that allows me to draw anything under the sun. Like any concept I come up with that's a cool idea for an X-Men cover or that kind of stuff. All I've got to do now is pitch it to Marvel and make it a variant cover. And I've been able to draw like some of my favorite things ever. I can homage whatever I want. I can like draw any character pretty much in almost any costume. I mean, that's the good thing about this variant cover craze is it's allowed me to build a portfolio of work that I'm just very proud of. And it's in print. People can collect it and trade it and grade it and do whatever they want. But it's not just like a commission in somebody's portfolio. These are all pieces that now are in print, are official Marvel pieces. So if there's ever an art book and these kinds of things down the road, these pieces exist legitimately. And as I'm getting older now and my hair's getting grayer, I'm kind of like thinking more in the lines of legacy and like, what is my legacy? And, you know, I just, the idea, I can't get more passionate about this. The idea of any kind of drawing that doesn't like make it into the public awareness. Yes. It's almost become an obsession of mine. Like,
when you work hard, when you take a while to do something, for it not to be seen as a crime, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, it's funny too. I have these like you mentioned Frazetta before, and I've got like all these Frazetta books, and every time there's a new one, even though I have all the same paintings, it's like I'll buy it again because I never know if it's got like a it's like I never know if they have a better scan or a better printing. So it's like, but one thing I do notice when I flip through the Frazetta books is I'm very aware of pretty much everything he ever did, and it's wild to think, oh, that was his career. Like that is it. Like it's like if he had chosen to spend a third of that doing commissions that you never saw, it wouldn't be in this book, you know, or I don't know. So I'm really aware of that, going like, okay, how much of my work do I want to fall away and not be in the public discussion? And that's why I became so obsessed with this. As I want as much of my work to officially exist so it can be gathered in books and volumes or something like that. And I just want to do as much of it as possible. And also too, I mean, you know, now it's like we were talking about when we were in our 20s and you got your whole career ahead of you and you just think at some point I'm going to do a Batman comic and at some point I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Well, now I'm like 50 going like, okay, I've got to be really aware now of like, okay, I just don't have an infinite amount of decades now. I've got to like go, what am I going to do with those decades? What projects do I absolutely want to make sure I actually do? Because now I've got to be a little more aware of that. You know how it goes. It's like you have to think, okay, I have to plan out my next like 5 years, 10 years very carefully and sort of think about, I mean, we all hope we get to be, 99 or whatever it is. But, like sometimes you have to start thinking about like, what if my hand starts shaking one day? Or what if my eyes start going? And so I'm more aware than ever that I've got to just make those decisions very carefully. And I don't want my work to be unseen or tucked away somewhere. That just horrifies me.
So how many covers a year will you do for Marvel then? What's a typical amount for you?
This year's particularly high. I actually we were talking about, I think I actually broke a record this year, but I did a whole series of covers over the summer that were like single character images. It was like a J. Scott Campbell month at Marvel or something like that. But the idea was all these single characters would then ultimately create one of those Marvel collages where you've got all the characters, which I always wanted to do one of those anyways, because I used to have that on my wall, like this giant poster of every Marvel character, like just jumping. And while I didn't do every Marvel character, because that would be ridiculous, I did do like about 28 prominent ones. And there was a whole month there where it was like every character. The problem was, Mark, I got behind. So this ruined my summer because I got behind. I was supposed to do this. I was supposed to sporadically do this the whole year. And then like it got to be the summer. And I think I was spending too much time in Italy. I came back and I had to like just like all of July just crank out these covers. Like I had to do like about 5 or 6 of them a week just to get them done. But they were single characters, so it wasn't impossible. But that definitely got my numbers up quite a bit this year. But I don't know. I would say probably, and it averages anywhere from like 30 to 50 covers I'll do a year for Marvel. But there's also stuff I do for DC, stuff I do favors for other, like this year, I think I did several covers for independent publishers where a buddy of mine would say, can you do this cover for me? I really need it to boost numbers or something like that. So you always get talked into stuff too. And then also too, statues. I'm always designing these statues. Like I have 3 right now in active development at Sideshow right now on my own licenses. And then also I think I've got a few more Todd McFarlane DC ones coming out. So there's always just other projects coming out. We just did a Kickstarter ourselves actually for Danger Girl. I
saw this. I'm going to be back. How many days has that got left? Is it?
Oh, it wrapped up actually. We were really happy with. Yeah, it wrapped up about. When I was in New York Comic Con, it wrapped up. So I was. But did very, very well for us. But that's also. Even though it's artwork that already exists, I'm actively involved in making sure it looks correct and gathering up the doodads that'll make up the book. So that's been kind of pulling my attention as well, just to make sure those books are as good as they can be.
I love the look of that. Will that ever be released as like a book for bookstores?
In fact, actually, I think one of the it's really cool they do this too. One of the tiers on the Kickstarter was a retailer buy-in, where if you have any retailer that had their like diamond account or maybe not diamond, it might have been lunar. I don't know. When it comes to that stuff, I'm not sure who's controlling that right now. But if as long as their account is in order, they could buy it at at a retail price or a pre-retail, whatever, wholesale price. And then I think so the Danger Girl book will exist in a retail environment. I think the deluxe one that had my book Wildsiders in there too, I think that might have been specifically just a Kickstarter only thing. But if the demand is there, we'll have the files to make another printing of that. And I think sometimes these artist editions I've heard can go into additional printings, sometimes even additional printings where they add material too. But I don't know if that's going to be the case.
Great. I mean, I've kind of hit this point where I'm actually buying more of that stuff than I'm buying comics. These, like I say, I've got all those editions of all those different Frazetta books.
They're beautiful, right? Those are just my favorite.
A Kirby Covers collection or something like that, and they look great on the shelves, don't they? To have them,
they do.
On your
so giant.
Yeah, it's great. It's so good.
Yeah, I know. I love those books. I mean, there's something about just. Maybe that, what it is? I thought about this recently too. Maybe it's not just the nostalgia because we see these pages presented in this way that we never quite saw before. But maybe it's the size that makes us feel like a little kid again because they look they're so big.
The Treasury edition, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's like a Treasury edition, or we're small again reading a comic book. I don't know. There's something kind of funny about that. So I think that has something to do with it. That maybe is touching a subconscious level.
Well, listen. On that note, I've just, like I say, I just get back from the holidays. My wife's unpacking all the bags. I'll go and give her a wee hand, But like,
yes.
Listen, I'm only doing a handful more of these, but you were one of the people I was desperate to talk to because I've always admired your work, although we've never really met in person. I've always thought your
I appreciate that.
It was amazing, and I've kept everything you've ever done. I've got a copy of all your Wildstorm stuff in particular. I've always wondered, were you at Jim Lee's party at Christmas 2000? Frank Whiteley and I were out at that when we were.
I know that we've spoken a handful of times. I think at like a Comic-Con or two, we would run into each other sometimes. I know we've run into each other 2 or 3 times, and this is, by the way, this has been a delight for me too. I'm also an admirer. So when you reached out, I was of course thrilled to. I think I've watched a few of these. In fact, I watched the one where you talked to Travis because
the Travis one.
Travis. Yeah, Travis and I go a ways back. So it's in fact, I just got to see him for the first time in years at Lake Como, which was great because we haven't seen each other in forever. But yeah, no, it's very cool to be able to see you again and catch up and sort of have this conversation. I enjoyed it very much.
Great. Well, listen, hope to speak to you soon and all the best.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, well, let's not make this a one and done. We'll have to catch up again sometime.
Make it a weekly thing. We'll make it a weekly thing.
Sounds good, man.
Listen, all the best then. Catch you later then.
Yeah, you too, and settle back in there. I'm glad you're back from that vacation. Hopefully,
do you know what? I'm away working tomorrow. I'm away tomorrow morning in a 10 a.m. flight. So.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
no rest for the wicked. You're right back at it.
I cannot believe it. Like I said, I've got this Kickstarter campaign for our big book now. It runs out, I think, on Friday, and I'm working abroad until Thursday, I think. So
oh wow!
I did not time this well at all. So.
No, I think we all seem to have that problem. I mean, I definitely overbooked myself this year. I'm kind of looking forward to just the December when hopefully things can just quiet down and just like settle into the holidays and not feel like I go.
Absolutely.
So,
well, listen, all the best. I'll catch you later.
Yeah, same, and good luck with the rest of that Kickstarter.
Thanks, then. See you soon.
All right. Take it easy. Bye-bye.